Egomaniacal, being obsessively self-centered, extremely selfish, and have an exaggerated, inflated sense of self-importance, often to the point of lacking empathy and disregarding others' needs or feelings to get what they want. With that definition in mind, I want you to take a look at these 3 clips for me and tell me what they all have in common.
Say my name.
You what? I don't have a damn clue who the hell you are.
Yeah, you do. I'm the cook. I'm the man who killed Gus Fring.
Bullshit. Cartel got Frank.
You sure?
What do you think the cure for cancer is, Eric?
What?
The cure for cancer. What is it?
I don't know what it is. But I know it's not killing and torturing people for your own sick fucking pleasure.
I've never murdered anyone in my life. The decisions are up to them.
Yeah, well, putting a gun to someone's head and forcing them to pull the trigger is still murder.
Since when is force a problem for you?
Kira has become law in the world we now live. He's the one who's maintaining order. I have become justice. The only hope for mankind. Kill me? Is that really the right thing to do?
You could say that these 3 are some of the most insane people ever put to screen, but I would say that they're the most egomaniacal of all fictional killers. And through amazing writing, their ego is ultimately what leads to the downfall of each of these characters. I'm using the term downfall a little loosely because while some of these characters do succeed at finishing their goals, every single character in this video has the exact same thing in common. They all die sooner than they would have normally if it wasn't because of their own actions, even if some of them did eventually resort to planning on dying. I'm going to be talking about 3 completely different fictional killers, when they gained an ego, how their ego affected their actions, and finally, when their ego got too big for their own good and eventually led to their downfall. Let's get into it.
I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot. You think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
Killer number 1 is one you all know very well and love very much, and that is Walter White from Breaking Bad. Walter White is perhaps the most realistic, straightforward, and maybe even the best example of a victim of their own ego. Something Walter White has in common with all 3 of these killers is that he pretty much already had an ego before he ever became a killer. It was just fairly small, and then over time got much bigger. In the pilot episode, Walter tells Jesse that his meth is shit and that he can make something infinitely better without even knowing shit about cooking meth, so that's pretty much red flag number 1 for the audience. I think it's so interesting that from the very first episode, we clearly see that Walter has the "I'm the smartest person in the room" mentality at all times, which is pretty common between all 3 of these killers. The best example of Walter flexing his ego in his early days before he starts going crazy with power is in season 1 episode 5 titled Gray Matter, where we see that Walter back in college created a company with some friends. Now it's worth billions, all thanks to Walter. At least that's what he thinks, even though he left the company in its early years when it was only worth a couple thousand. Walter attends a party hosted by his former colleagues only to find out it was a setup by Walter's wife, Skylar, to get his colleagues to pay for his chemotherapy treatment because he has cancer. Any normal person in this situation would gracefully accept their patronage, but oh no, not Mr. White here. He gets offended that his wife would do such a nice thing for him and completely rejects his colleagues, all because he doesn't think he needs them and fully believes he can pull all the treatment money out of his own ass, even though at this point in the show, Walter has only cooked meth once or twice, barely making any money. And to top it all off, Walter still hates his colleagues for making quote-unquote his business successful without him, so he basically has 2 entirely different reasons for rejecting them. Overall, a great episode and a great showcase of his ego and him being a self-indulgent asshole very early on. Bravo Vince, or whatever the fuck Breaking Bad fans say. Now, most people would say that Walter's first ego boost is when he kills Emilio and Crazy 8, but I would argue that is just a confidence boost, that he's capable of doing this business and getting away with it, which then, yeah, obviously later on translates into an ego boost, especially when Walter gives working with other dealers a second try with Tuco Salamanca. Now, I personally think Tuco is the most intimidating villain in the entire show because he's extremely psychotic and has no morals whatsoever, unlike someone like Gus Fring later on. And this seems to be the case for Walter and Jesse as well, because in season 1 episode 6, Walter and Jesse are set up to meet Tuco and become business partners with him, but instead Tuco beats up Jesse, steals his meth and money. This is exactly why I think all of the confidence Walter gains over the first few episodes finally translates into his first big ego trip. Walter hears about what happened to Jesse and devises a plan to get Tuco to pay him back and to become their business partner. Even though Walter is scared shitless of Tuco, he walks into Tuco's office with full confidence, knowing he's the smartest person in the room, and demands his money and meth back. Tuco proceeds to laugh in Walter's face, which is of course when we get the iconic scene.
This is not meth.
I think this scene is so great because not only does it show Walter's intelligence and how he has confidence in that part of himself even if he's scared, also because this is essentially the first time and maybe only time Walter has a big ego trip that doesn't involve killing someone, which is actually pretty uncommon for all three of these killers. They usually get their ego boost from killing someone, but in this specific instance, Walter just gets it out of simply outsmarting Tuco. The next notable ego trip Walter has is in season 3 episode 12 titled Half Measures, where Walter kills in cold blood for the first time instead of self-defense. Walter realizes that Jesse is in danger from rival gang members and decides to go save him instead of allowing him to get injured or killed. The way they show it is really cool too, because they make it look like Jesse's about to have a shootout with these two gang members, and then bam, out of nowhere Walter runs the gang members over with his car, killing one and injuring the other before getting out and shooting the injured one. This is such an important scene in terms of the turning point of the story and Walter going through his character arc. While at this point Walter is on his way to becoming a full-blown egomaniac, he's pretty pacifistic and against killing unless in self-defense. These first two real cold-blooded kills mark the end of the Walt being a pacifist and him realizing he's gonna have to do whatever it takes to ensure himself and Jesse's safety while remaining number one in the drug business, which then becomes the perfect setup for the very next episode, season 3 episode 13 titled Full Measures, where we see Walter do something pretty evil for the first time. Gus Fring, his boss, wants to have Walter and Jesse killed because of how problematic they are and have Gus's personal chemist Gale take over for the both of them. Now pretty much this whole season has established that Walter actually really likes Gale. So as a viewer at this point, you really start to wonder how the hell Walter's going to get himself out of this situation. And then that's when it's revealed that Walter has sent Jesse to fucking murder Gale in his own apartment in order to save the two of them. Side note, I think I've seen this gif of Jesse crying and shooting Gale at least 1,000,000 times before. In my personal opinion, I think this is the first time Walter does something truly evil. Not only does he murder what is essentially an innocent bystander, but makes his innocent partner do the dirty work for him. Episode 12 does a great job at showing Walter is willing to use violence to further his goals, and then this episode takes it one step further, showing that not only is Walter willing to use violence, but he's willing to use violence on innocent people and manipulate his partner Jesse. It's very appropriate that episode 12 is titled Half Measures and episode 13 is titled Full Measures. While at this point in time Walter has become pretty bad, this isn't even close to what I would call the point where it becomes a full-on egomaniac. That would be in season 4 episode 13 titled Face Off, a very iconic episode for a number of reasons.
Did you just bring a pup into a hospital?
What? Was I supposed to leave it on his car?
At this point in time, Walter and Jesse are sick and tired of Gus Fring and have devised a plan to get rid of his ass once and for all. Walter plans to blow him up with a pipe bomb but can't figure out how until Walter finds out that Gus plans to finally kill his longtime enemy and rival Hector Salamanca, who's in a wheelchair and in a nursing home. Real talk though, how petty do you have to be to kill your enemy from like 20 years ago who's a fucking vegetable now? I mean, I get it, Hector Salamanca is a pretty despicable guy, but I don't know, that level of pettiness on Gus's part is just really funny. When Gus goes to lethally inject Hector, it's revealed that Walter strapped his pipe bomb to his wheelchair, with his little annoying ass bell being the igniter, killing Hector, Gus, and Gus's right hand man. Walter and Jesse go back to Gus's meth lab, killing the last few employees, and then setting the lab ablaze. And just to top it all up with a big cherry on top, Walter just had to flex his big ego after all of that. He just couldn't resist. His wife calls him asking what the hell happened, and he just simply replies with,
I won.
Honestly, a pretty badass scene and definitely a well-earned ego trip, because even though Walter is well on his way to becoming a pretty awful individual, you really hate Gus Fring even more, and just for the time being, root for Walter to overcome his difficulties, ultimately succeed in his goals to take down Gus. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot, but it's also revealed in this episode that Walter just casually poisoned Jesse's girlfriend's kid just to pin it on Gus and trick Jesse into going against Gus and helping Walt to take him down. Pretty double-edged sword of an ending. You're pumped and you're just like, fuck yeah, Walter, you won. But then it's that sudden realization afterwards that he, once again, just like with killing Gale, had to do something awful in order order to succeed and win, and he doesn't give a shit about what it is or what it'll take. Which then brings us to season 5, where Walter has become a full-blown egomaniac, and this whole season is basically one big ego trip for him. Season 5 episode 7 is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. This episode is titled Say My Name, very appropriately named once again. Walter, Jesse, and Mike meet with a rival gang where Walter offers to take over their operation and have them sell his product, which he knows is infinitely better. The main guy of the rival gang mocks Walter and tells him he doesn't even know who he is or why he's talking to him. And that's when Walter has his biggest ego trip of the entire show.
I'm the cook. I'm the man who killed Gus Fring.
Bullshit. Cartel got free.
You sure?
Are you sure?
I love the small detail of Mike rolling his eyes in the background, which is very important for later on in this episode, because this is the exact episode when Walter's ego gets too big for his own good, causes a domino effect that eventually leads to his downfall and the death of multiple main characters. At the end of the episode, Mike explodes out of rage at Walter, calling out his ego and pride and how the act of killing Gus fucked everything up, and how everyone could be a danger from the DEA because some informants in prison. Walter gets mad because Mike won't give up the names of the informants, and on top of that, Walter's ego gets hurt, and so out of a fit of rage, Walter shoots Mike.
Shut the fuck up. Let me die in peace.
Mike crawls away and bleeds out, and this won't be the last time Walter gets someone killed or makes someone turn on him. Season 5 episode 1 titled Live Free or Die saw a good man turns on Walter. In season 5 episode 14 titled Osmondeus? I don't know. Walter's brother Hank and Jesse turn on him and try to set him up to get arrested. Plan goes wrong when white supremacists that Walter hired show up, kill Hank, and kidnap Jesse. Walter rushes home, and then to make it even worse, his own wife and son turn on him when they find out that he somehow got Hank killed, forcing Walter to flee and go into isolation for the entire next episode. And it's all exactly as Mike had previously said. Walter couldn't just leave things alone and just simply work for Gus. He had to go and ruin everything with his big ass ego. In the show finale, season 5 episode 16 titled Felina, a bit of time has passed in between episodes when Walter finally decides that he's going to set everything right. He's going to save Jesse, get his money back, and deliver it to his family and take out all the neo-Nazis in one fell swoop. But before he enacts his final plan, he stops to meet with his wife Skylar for the final time. This scene is probably my favorite in the whole show besides the ending, because Walter has his final ego trip on screen, but it's not in the way that you would think. Throughout the entire show, Walter has told his wife over and over again that everything he's been doing has been for the benefit of the family, and every single time his wife denies it and wants him to confess that it's simply not true. And Walter finally, after all this time, confesses why he really did all this.
I liked it. I was good at it. I was alive.
In one immaculate fell swoop, Walter frees Jesse, kills all the ones who did him wrong, gets shot in the process, and then finally accepts his fate while bleeding out as the best song ever plays over the ending scene. What makes this ending so great is that while Walter has become pretty despicable over the last 2 seasons, he still manages to do right by everyone he did wrong in the end, which is truly what makes him one of the most interesting and complex fictional characters of all time. I think that's what makes characters like Walter so interesting, just like all 3 of these killers in the video. They all think what they're doing is for the greater good and can't admit what they're doing is evil, but also admit that they had fun doing what they did. Walter is truly the only one to do that out of all 3 of these characters. And with that being said, that concludes my assessment on Walter White. Like I said before, the most realistic and grounded example of a fictional egomaniac, while adding on top of that his moral complexity and interesting character.
What's your resolution this year?
I want to be a better cook.
Oh, I want to see some of the food.
Sure thing.
Excellent work, Knuckles.
Thank you, Mr. White.
You're cooking in a fucking meth lab?
2 pounds, please.
Live or die. Make your choice.
Killer number 2 is John Kramer from the Saw movies, and he is a bit of an oddball in the sense that he doesn't have very many ego trips on screen. His egomaniacal is often portrayed through his traps and games he forces his victims to go through. While he claims to be helping people and to be unbiased in choosing his victims, a lot of them are pretty personal, especially in Saw 2, 3, and X. I want to get into John's backstory shown in Saw 6, so once again, spoiler alert, but for the Saw movies. What makes John so unique compared to his fellow killers on this list is that he actually has a very tragic backstory. John was once a normal man working as a civil engineer who had a very beautiful home and a supportive wife, Jill. We see in these flashbacks that Jill got pregnant, and John and Jill were very excited about it. They found out it was a boy and they named him Gideon. John then created Billy the Puppet as a gift/companion for his son Gideon. And then that's when tragedy struck as some low-life druggie causes Jill to have a miscarriage. John then went into a severe depression, refusing to see his wife and refusing to do his job. After a little bit, Jill gets fed up and goes to find him alongside John's work partner, and they try to convince him to come back and to continue doing his work helping people, but he ultimately refuses. So Jill decides to divorce John, and then to make it even worse, he gets diagnosed with cancer, with the doctors telling him that they think his cancer is inoperable. John, fully at rock bottom, attempts to take his own life by driving off a cliff in his car, but to his surprise, he survives. After surviving, he gained a newfound appreciation for his life, and he thought that maybe he could help other fucked up people redeem their lives by making them face their own death, which is when he fully becomes Jigsaw, with him making traps and games for those he deemed fit. Like I said at the beginning of this section, John claims that he is unbiased when choosing his victims, but for 99% of his traps, he chooses people that personally fucked him over, starting with the man who caused Jill's miscarriage. John barely makes his trap fair, essentially almost guaranteeing that the man would die, and of course he does in fact die. And this is pretty much where all of John's ego and god complex originates from. After this trap, he gains the mindset that he and only he can save people, and if they don't survive their trap, then they simply never deserve to live in the first place. Continuing on John's very personal games, he then chooses Gordon, a doctor from the hospital he got diagnosed at, and Adam, a photographer. John had found out that Gordon lacked empathy for his patients as well as his family, as he was actively cheating on his wife. Adam had been hired to take photos of Gordon cheating, and John deemed Adam as someone who doesn't care about anyone or anything and just lives to ruin other people's lives. And that is how we got the iconic bathroom game/trap in the original Saw movie. I want to jump to Saw 2 now, since in the original movie you don't really meet John until the end. At this point in the story, John has developed such a big ego off screen that he now believes even the police can't touch him. So he purposely lets the police catch him in order to test a specific detective by the name of Matthews. Matthews is a corrupt cop who frames fairly innocent people and wrongfully gets them thrown in jail. And on top of that, he's a single father who's really just a major dickhead to his son and just overall pretty shitty father. John sets up a game where everyone Matthews has wrongfully arrested are trapped in a house together along with his own son. John's hope is that Matthews will gain a new appreciation for his son and learn his lesson in being corrupt and fix his ways and continue to do his job correctly. The thing that really gets me about John is that he claims he's unbiased, but just by watching Tobin Bell's wonderful performance, you could just tell that fucker enjoys his victims' suffering. Now to go as far as to say that he hopes that they won't learn the lesson and will die or just suffer horribly, especially in this movie and Saw X. Besides the very obvious funny rage bait from John,
What do you think the cure for cancer is, Eric?
What?
The cure for cancer. What is it?
I don't know what it is.
I think there is a specific scene where we actually see him fully flex his ego for maybe the only time when Matthews interrogates him and questions his very flawed morals and logic. John explains that people only learn to value life when faced with their own mortality, an insight he gained after his terminal cancer diagnosis and failed suicide attempt, as we talked about earlier. He believes his work is a gift, and he acts as if he has a unique, profound understanding of the human condition that others lack, which is a major part of his grand self-image. Obviously, Matthews calls him out on this, but John just continues to double down on the whole, I appreciate my life, so only I can help others to do so as well. The other more subtle part of this whole ego trip we more so understand in the end is that John fully believes the police can't catch him. Even if he gives himself up, he knows he will eventually get away scot-free, because he assumes Matthews will fail his test, which is really fucked up since he claims he wants his victims to win, but I really disagree in this case. I think in Saw 3, he generally does want his victims to win and learn their lesson, but we'll get to that later. His increasing worrying of his son eventually builds and causes him to once again do what a corrupt cop would do, basically torture John. And then John tricks him into driving him out to a disclosed location with just the two of them, and in a glorious twist we see that Matthew's son was safe and secure the whole time, back where the police held Jigsaw in a literal safe. And then it's revealed that John had been training an apprentice to one day take over for him, Amanda Young, a young drug addict seen in both the first movie and this movie. Amanda traps Matthews in the bathroom from the first film, and that's when we get perhaps my favorite ending in all of the Saw movies.
Game over.
I'll fucking kill you! Fucking bitch!
Man, I just love John's smug ass face in the scene because he knows Matthews lost his test and Amanda's gonna come and get him so the police will never catch him. For someone who's supposedly unbiased and fair, this is such a fucked up thing to do and an insane ego boost. Like I said earlier, Saw X is a bit of an oddball in the series because instead of John being an evil dick, his ego in this movie is driven purely by revenge. In this movie, you actually want to see John's victims suffer and die, which is what makes it one of my favorites of the series. I think that's what makes all three of these characters in this video so interesting. You see them go against people who are worse, and then you suddenly start cheering for them. In Saw X, John is pretty desperate to not die of his cancer, so he seeks out some alternate methods for chemotherapy, and he ends up discovering this group of doctors who are supposedly giving experimental surgery to cancer patients down in Mexico City. John meets the head doctor and gets the surgery done, during which he notices a few red flags, but he doesn't make much of it. Eventually, he does figure out it's a scam, and we see that most of the doctors are just shitty normal people trying to make a quick buck, and in a beautifully fucked up fashion, John and Amanda set up their game, and then proceed to hunt down these scumbags one by one, starting with the guy who drove them to the location. And man, what's even more messed up about this movie is that John is very much present and in the faces of his victims while they do their traps. We know he likes to watch the show, but this one is so personal that he wanted to make sure that they saw him as they suffered, which I'm going to count as a big ego trip. If you thought John wanted Matthews to suffer, think about how badly he wants these people to suffer, which is why I'm actually surprised that the first victim, Diego, survives and John just lets his ass go. I'm going to count this as another ego trip because John basically walks around the room rubbing it in everyone's faces how he found out how fake they all are, essentially mocking all of them. All of the traps in this film are great. You have one person who has to saw off their own leg and then suck bone marrow out of it, which is just impossible to do, so obviously she dies. Another girl has to swing in front of radiation without being burned alive, and then probably the worst trap in the entire franchise, the guy of the group has to perform a fucking lobotomy on himself. If I found out that was my trap, I would honestly just wait to die because that's insane. And then you have the final member of the group who orchestrated the entire scam, Cecilia. Not only is this woman cocky and narcissistic, but she does not give a single fuck about her fellow scammers. In fact, one of them, she basically gets killed by giving her bad advice on her trap. The plot twist of this film is genius, although you do have to stretch your disbelief a little bit. While all this has been going on, a man shows up to the place claiming to be a victim of Cecilia's. This man, Parker, ends up freeing Cecilia and making John and this little kid from earlier in the movie get into her trap, which for one is so cool and interesting because it's the only time you ever see John put into one of his own traps, but also because Cecilia and the audience at this point become puzzled because if it was just her left, why was her trap designed for two people? And that's when Cecilia attempts to reclaim her money and bam, you realize John had set up two traps for her and Parker just in case. Both traps are both designed to test Cecilia to see if she would betray her lover or sacrifice herself for him. You can imagine which one she chooses. I just love the smug look on both John and Amanda's faces when they finally see that they got Cecilia right where they want her. A big ass ego trip if I've ever seen one, but a well-deserved one, which is very different from how Saw 3 is. In Saw 3, we meet our main character, or victim, if you will, Jeff, who has suffered a terrible loss. Jeff's son has been killed in a drunk driving accident, with the driver getting away pretty much scot-free. Because of this, Jeff had become very vengeful, dedicating his life to tracking down this person with the intent to kill them. This caused him to neglect his wife and daughter, making them really not like him, which is not unlike John's backstory, which is why I think it's so beautiful that John chose him and how then Jeff eventually becomes his final game. It feels very full circle. Jeff's game is very simple. You must move from room to room, encountering several people responsible for his son's death and the killer getting away. You must choose to forgive them and save them, or not forgive them and let them die. While all this has been going on, Amanda kidnaps a surgeon who is very similar to Gordon. She cheats on her husband, doesn't care about anything or anyone. Amanda straps a shotgun collar to her neck, tells her that she must perform brain surgery on John, and if he dies, then she dies as well. Now, I wouldn't say that John's ego is the direct cause of his downfall, unlike the other two characters on this list, but I would say it is a big contribution in sort of a subtle way. John is obviously forced to place the fate of his life into the hands of Lynn, and by an extension also Jeff, but he has also been testing Amanda this entire time. Now, I would say John's ego comes in the way of him making Amanda his apprentice, and him thinking that only he can help Amanda and teach her to be better, as well as train her to take over for him when he's gone. Amanda's emotions and beliefs that none of Jigsaw's victims deserve to live essentially consume her by the end of the movie, resulting in her shooting Lynn and therefore failing her test that John had given to her.
Just destroyed 4 lives.
And of course, this snowballs even further as it's revealed that Lynn is actually Jeff's wife. When he reaches the end of his game and reaches the hospital room that everyone is in, he sees Lynn get shot and proceeds to then kill Amanda and John out of rage, also failing his test.
Your final sound.
I guess in a way you could say that this is a final act of ego from John, where he realizes creation has failed to meet his standards and he essentially punishes her for failing to live up to his image. I always felt that John had always thought he was a perfect teacher to his apprentices, but they were the problems and not him, because they were always inherently flawed, whether it be Amanda or Hoffman in the later Saw movies, both of which are failed apprentices in his view because they rig their traps and want people to suffer and die rather than learn a lesson and continue on living, which is kind of bullshit on John's part, because once again we constantly see throughout Saw 1, 2, 3, and X that he clearly enjoys seeing people suffer and lose their game. Obviously the biggest difference is that if they win and survive, then he does actually let them go, which is what makes John Kramer different from the other two killers on this list. He's able to let go of his ego and let his victims survive, while the other two characters absolutely do not. And with that being said, that concludes my assessment on John Kramer from the Saw movies.
You want to play a little game?
The third and final killer on this list is by far the most extreme character in here, and that is Light Yagami from Death Note. In episode 1 titled Rebirth, we see that Light is seemingly a normal kid who's extremely smart and is on top of his class in school. Like I said before about Walter White, and even to an extent John Kramer, there has to be somewhat of an ego already there in them to even become what they eventually become. And it does not take very long for Light, as we see him obtain the Death Note and is only shocked about it for a very small time, and then he immediately decides, yeah, I think of God now, and all criminals from now on are going straight to hell. And not only is that not good enough for him, but he wants the public to know he's out there smiting the criminals of the world so people live in fear of him and won't commit crimes.
It's only a matter of time before people figure out that these criminals are being eliminated by someone. I want the world to know of my existence, that there's someone out there passing righteous judgment on the wicked.
That's some insane Batman logic. I find it really funny that it took quite a while for Walter White to go from gaining confidence to boosting his ego. I mean, it took several episodes. Light gains his confidence after killing one single person and then immediately has a huge ego trip. Absolutely insane, and that's just the beginning. In episode 2 titled Confrontation, we see the introduction of Light's antagonist, L, a famous but secretive detective that has never lost a case before. L confronts Kira on live TV, essentially encouraging him to kill him. Light's ego is hurt because at this point he already believes no one can stop him, so he kills the man seen on TV just to find out it's actually not L, and now L has more info on how Kira kills his victims. I really like how this episode ends with both Light and L saying the same thing, not only introducing you to their rivalry, but also showing that they are pretty similar with similar beliefs and ideals and many other things like that.
I will hunt you down wherever you're hiding, and I will eliminate you. I am justice.
It's a really cool creative choice. Light claims that everything he does is necessary and in the name of justice, but in episode 5 titled Tactics, we see that Light starts to enjoy being Kira a little too much. At this point, Light has discovered that several FBI agents have come to Japan in hopes of working with L and investigating Kira, but Light uses an agent by the name of Ray Penbar that he previously encountered to not only kill all the FBI agents after him, but then to kill Ray Penbar and make sure that the last thing he sees before he dies is Light's face.
Light Yagami. Farewell, Ray Penbar.
And to make it even worse, Ray's wife figures out what happens and goes to the police station with information about what happened to Ray. Light, by chance, manages to intercept her and lead her away from the police station. After a pretty intense interaction, Light manages to get a real name and write it down at the Death Note, which is when we get this iconic line from Light.
If you don't mind my asking, why do you keep checking your watch?
I guess it's because I'm Kira.
It's one thing to take out the entire FBI because they're actively after you, but then to mind game and kill one singular woman and then rub it in her face. At this point in the story, if you didn't already think Light was a pretty bad person, I think this is the first time where you're just shocked as an audience at how fucked Light is in the head. And this is only episode 7, and Light already has a huge ego trip from just taking out FBI agents, which I think is a perfect way to continue his trend of if Light can barely outsmart and take out small agents after him, how can he possibly outsmart L and take him out. The first real time Light's big ego is challenged has to be in episode 7 titled Encounter, where L seeks out Light in person and then confesses to him that he is in fact L to invoke a reaction out of him.
I want to tell you I'm L.
Of course, Light manages to act unfazed, but we see that he is clearly shocked and even scared, because before this very scene, Light has always thought that taking out L was going to be easy. Now he's questioning that because L takes the initiative and does something that Light never in a million years expected him to do. Something I really despise about Light in terms of his fat ego, besides his obvious god complex, is how he treats women. Light has 3 different situations with 3 different women that go from inoffensive but slightly alarming to just straight up cruel and evil. In episode 4 titled Pursuit, we see Light actively being stalked by the FBI agent Ray, tries to throw him off using a bunch of different tactics, but also during this episode, Light takes a girl on a date for the sole purpose of trying to look normal. He also makes a snarky comment saying that he's popular and good with the ladies. Like I said, inoffensive. And then you have the introduction of Misa in episode 12 titled Love, who is not only revealed to have a second death note, but is obsessively in love with Kira and looks up to him. Throughout the entire show, Light not only treats her like shit, but he says several times that he only views her as a useful tool and doesn't give a shit about her at all.
Sorry, but I just couldn't wait for 2 weeks like you said. Actually, I was just on my way to your house when I spotted you.
This is the first time in my life that I've been provoked to hit a woman.
While this line is funny, it tells you everything you need to know about how Light views her and women in general. So not only is this man an egomaniac with a god complex, he's also a huge narcissist, unlike the other 2 killers on this list who are at the very least able to love or like someone other than just themselves. And that's not even the worst that we see Light treat a woman on the show. Jumping ahead a bit to episode 32 titled Selection, Light reunites with an old high school date he had who has since become a worshiper of Kira and essentially spreads the gospel of Kira on live TV. Light meets up with her, confesses to her that he is Kira, and then continuously goes on fake dates with her in order to gain her trust, ultimately just to use her to take out one of Light's biggest enemies, getting her kidnapped, violated, making her kill the target that Light gave her, and then ultimately dying all in the process, which Light had also planned on. If anyone ever tells you that Light is their favorite Death Note character, then just keep everything I said in mind when they tell you that. Getting the evolution of Light's narcissism out of the way and going back to his ego, the big turning point in his ego reaching the biggest it can possibly get is in an episode that fans know all too well, and it is the highest rated episode in the entire show and the episode that changes everything. In episode 25 titled Silence, we said that Light has figured out that Misa's Shinigami Rem deeply cares for Misa, which is pretty much against the Shinigami's rules. Light intentionally puts Misa in danger of getting caught by L, forcing Rem to either let Misa get caught or potentially die, or the other option is to write L's name in her notebook and save Misa, which would also kill herself because Shinigamis aren't allowed to intervene with the human world and especially not allowed to save someone who is supposed to die. Unfortunately, Rem eventually chooses to kill L and herself to save Misa, giving Light exactly what he wants. And man, is it fucking depressing. Throughout the whole episode, it's heavily implied that L knows he's gonna die and has essentially given up, and it really shows.
Tell me, Light, from the moment you were born, has there ever been a point where you've actually told the truth?
This entire rivalry between L and Light is really what makes Death Note and Light as a character very different from the 2 other characters in this video, which is that for a while you may root for Light a little bit, but eventually L completely takes that over and you want to see him take down Kira. At least if you're not an insane edgelord that roots for Light, because you're really not supposed to. Light manages to hide his big ego trip until after L's funeral, where he just has a giant fucking maniacal breakdown, with it being probably the most iconic scene in the entire series.
It's only a matter of time before I get rid of the police. What do you think of that, Elle? This is my perfect victory! That's right! I win!
The scene is very obviously where Light's ego gets too big for his own good, leading to his eventual downfall. But before I get to that, I want to discuss something that all 3 of these characters have in common, which is the need or want to have an accomplice to their crimes, and even more so the desire to indoctrinate someone into becoming their apprentice to carry on their work. Walter White has Jesse Pinkman, who he constantly manipulates and tricks into doing his dirty work and inadvertently helping him achieve his goals. John Kramer has Amanda Young and Mark Kaufman, and finally we have Light, who has a character by the name of Mikami, who we meet in episode 32 titled Selection. Mikami fully believes that Kira is God and worships him, as well as being completely obsessed with filling a whole page of names in the Death Note every single day, which then brings us to the downfall of Kira/Light. During this last third of the show, Light has been going against 2 characters by the name of Mello and Ear, who are L's successors. Since L's death, Light's ego has been at the biggest possible amount. ends, but it takes all the way up until the second to last episode for it to pop like a balloon. In episode 36, titled January 28, we said that Light has devised a plan to kill Nier, as well as the rest of his own task force with the help of Mikami, which is his first mistake. We see what happened with John when he put his trust and life into the hands of Amanda. Everything went to shit. And the same thing happens here with not only Mikami failing Light and messing up his plan, but Light also makes another huge mistake. He underestimates Nier, calling him a cheap imitation of L, and that mindset of him thinking Nier is an idiot causes him to make several mistakes in his plan, with him also not considering a few alternative outcomes to the showdown.
You did have a chance to win. If only you'd taken it. You were just too naive. You're nothing compared to L.
Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now.
Light even giggles like a schoolgirl, telling himself to hold in his laughter. That's how much his ego has completely blinded him.
No, I can't laugh yet. I've got to hold it in. They're all gonna die.
In the final episode, titled The New World, Light flexes his ego too soon, revealing himself as Kira to Nier, just for no one to die because Nier had replaced Mikami's death note with a fake. After Nier breaks down how he outsmarted Light, Light proceeds to have one big final ego trip, laughing hysterically and then explaining how he and only he could truly fix the world with the power of the death note. Once again, both the OG voice actor and the English one crush it, and I actually think their two hysterical laughs convey two different emotions. The Japanese laugh sounds a lot more menacing and threatening, whereas the English voice actor's laugh sounds more like a mental breakdown and just a release from having all his secrets pent up and building towards this moment. The Japanese one almost feels like he's saying, "Yeah, I'm Kira, what are you gonna do about it?" While the English one almost feels like a sigh of relief. After this scene, Light, in a final act of desperation, tries to use the Death Note paper from his watch to kill someone, and in response he is gunned down by none other than the innocent character who had been rooting for Light the whole show. Light manages to run away, making his way to some sort of warehouse. We see Ryuk give some commentary before writing Light's name in his Death Note, and then Light quietly bleeds out on some stairs as he envisions the ghost of L watching over him. The meaning behind the stairs is very clever, as Ryuk had told Light in the very first episode that people who have death notes can either go to heaven or hell when they die. Light had also seen his younger self on his way to his deathbed, which is up to interpretation on what it means, but I interpret it as that essentially shows that Light was Kira's first ever victim, and that is the downfall and end of Light Yagami. I think it's interesting when comparing these three characters because they have so much in common but all are very unique in a lot of ways. I think the way I presented these characters was in the perfect order, as it not only goes from least extreme and least insane to most extreme and most insane, but also it's the order in which these characters have the least to most impact on the world. Walter White did everything for himself and will only really be remembered by his wife, son, and Jesse Pinkman. John Kramer is a step up, where we know he will be moderately remembered, especially by the police, to the point where in a spin-off called Spiral, we see a police officer take up the work of John long after his death. And then we have Light, who will be remembered by pretty much the entire world, especially Japan, very long after his death. I mean, there's an entire religion and cult that forms around Kira and worships him. Things like that don't just quickly fade away, so it's safe to say he will be remembered for a very long time. And with that being said, that concludes my assessment on Light Yagami from Death Note. I want to thank everyone for watching, as this video has taken me quite a while to make. I think when it comes out, it'll have reached the 2-month mark since I started working on it. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thanks for watching.
The IRS! Like that's not how the DMV! Like that's not how the fucking book works! Holy shit, like you were right!
All the days became so